Elsewhere, the University of Houston's rough football season continues. Their fourth game of the year has been postponed, this time due to contact tracing of COVID-19 on North Texas's team. Houston previously was supposed to play Rice, Memphis, and Baylor. Their next hope for a game, Tulane, October the 8th. Meanwhile, Notre Dame's game against Wake Forest has been rescheduled for December 12th. That game was originally scheduled to be played this past Saturday. It was postponed after 7 Notre Dame players tested positive for COVID-19. And I wanted to stop down on that and get some more insight, because I think there are a lot of important pieces of this. Our insider, Heather Dinich, is here. And Paul Finebaum, I'll start with you. I saw in your notes there have been so many cancellations so far this season. Why did this one with the Notre Dame team specifically concern you?
Greeny, this is the first time we've seen a game canceled because of another game. During the build-up to the season, we were all concerned. What's going to happen when you get 22 players on the field? And we don't know very much right now, and Notre Dame officials are being very cautious, and for good reason. But something caused USF to cancel the game, and the only bit of evidence that we have is that they played Notre Dame the previous week, which had already canceled a game with Wake Forest. I'm not the most brilliant person when it comes to deductive logic, but I think this one's pretty easy to figure out.
Heather, what are you hearing from the people you talk to?
Well, what had to happen was Notre Dame told South Florida who exactly was infected. So South Florida's people had to go back and look at game film to see who was engaged with those players, exactly how they were engaged, and for how long, to help them determine their contact tracing. And then as a precaution, they postponed their game against FAU. But as Paul said, they have not stated specifically how the virus got from, well, he said Notre Dame, how the virus got to South Florida. And they wouldn't just say exactly how many. They said a couple positive tests.
All right, so then let's get into what I think is an interesting part of the story. December 20th is a date that is looming out there. That's when they're going to choose the 4 teams for the college football playoff. And everyone has got to try and get their season in before then. I guess my question is, if we start to see more and more of these postponements, not cancellations, but postponements, Heather, is there any wiggle room in that date?
Well, I will say this. Moving the college football playoff is a Herculean task, but it is not impossible. And the reason it's so challenging is twofold. The first is because you start running into NFL playoffs, which take up just about every weekend and Saturdays and Sundays. And then you have the commissioners who are in charge of this thing, right? So, Greeny, if you're talking about everyone who's playing in the same predicament, then maybe it is a little bit more possible and more realistic. But if you're talking about a select few teams, then you have to convince Greg Sankey in the SEC, John Swofford in the ACC, Bob Bowlesby in the Big 12, who have all navigated their leagues through earlier starts, potentially longer games, to move it. And I think that becomes a more difficult conversation.
Paul, how should that be handled? When we get there, should there be flexibility with that date?
There should be. Greedy, only in college football can nothing change. I mean, we're still watching the NBA playoffs, and college football is stuck. And part of the reason they're stuck is that New Year's Day is sacrosanct. We have the Rose Bowl on that day. We have all we won't have the parades, but we have all the hullabaloo. And I just think they have to be open. Now, I do agree with Heather's point very much that these other leagues, the 3 leagues that have been playing all along, don't have to change because the Big Ten showed up late to the party after saying we're not coming to the party. And who knows whether the Pac-12 will show up. I think we will know pretty soon, but they are taking their time.
We may know today. Heather, that's my final question. What do we know about the Pac-12 and what should we expect today?
Well, we should expect a definitive answer one way or another. The chancellors and presidents are meeting later this afternoon, Pacific time, and if they decide to go ahead with this, then they are going to have to decide whether it's a late October start or early November. But these presidents and chancellors are wrestling with whether or not they can handle the idea of treating student athletes different than the general student body.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.